Most of the thoughts that arise on a day-to-day basis in your life are an absolute and utter lie. Realization isn't that we lie to ourselves, it's that we often mistake thoughts for truth. It's the constant identification with every thought that makes it so interesting that we've never really analyzed why it is that way. Why do I feel that way? Why is my day-to-day life being identified with negativity? All right? The question arose somehow, and I was thinking about this yesterday. If I have repeated the same negative thought thousands of times, does repetition make it true? And the answer is no, right? It doesn't make it true just because it's repeated millions of times. Alright? I'm not attacking you for having negative thoughts. I want you to understand that identification with those thoughts can become so strong that we stop questioning what is even being thought. This video is not a how to think positive, a positivity mindset video. I want you to become conscious of what is being thought. The title I wrote down yesterday is The Lies We Tell Ourselves. And this is, how many times have you lied to yourself in a sense that you said, I can't, I'm not good enough, I will never make it, I'm not worthy, I'm a failure, I do not deserve what just happened. Okay? These are thoughts that arise on a constant basis, on a day-to-day basis, 24/7, and I lived through that phase for several of years. The strange thing is that many of these statements feel true when we think them, right? They arrive with certainty, they arrive with emotion, they arrive with conviction. But how many of them are actually true? Or how many of them were true? Did that what you think really happen? Probably not. Looking back, I can see that many of the things I told myself back in the day were predictions disguised as facts. I assumed I would fail before trying. I assumed people would reject me before speaking. Honestly, it was a constant thought of myself. I assumed I wasn't capable before giving myself the opportunity to find out anyways. The thought appeared, and I accepted the thought, connected to the I, as my real reality. What fascinates me now is that I rarely stop to ask the simple question, who just said that? A thought entered my mind and somehow I immediately identified with it. I'm a failure. I'm depressed. I am broken. The word I, in a context of these sentences, is incredibly powerful. The moment we attach it to a thought, the thought becomes part of our identity. But what if that thought was simply passing through? What if it wasn't a fact? What if it wasn't even an accurate representation of who we are, of who you are? This is one of the most confusing aspects of being human. We hear a thought, and because it appears in our mind, we assume it belongs to us and must therefore be true. Yet thoughts can be wrong. they can be distorted. And how do they become distorted? They are influenced by fear. I was so fearful back in the day. Stress. I was in a constant state of survival. Honestly, exhaustion and trauma, habit of years of conditioning. A depressed person may read 100 books on happiness, listen to endless podcasts, and receive excellent advice from people who genuinely want to help, yet, yet very little of it seemed to stick. Why? Because understanding information intellectually and experiencing it emotionally are two different things. When negative thought patterns have been reinforced for years, they become effortless. There's no energy attached to the thought. The brain becomes efficient at producing them. The pathways in our brain have been traveled so many times that they require almost zero energy. Thus, the thoughts feel natural. The negativity feels like identity. And that's the trap I was caught in for many, many years. The goal is not to force positive thinking. The goal is to become conscious, to recognize that the thought has appeared, to observe it, to question it, to investigate it before accepting it as truth. And this part right now is something that you should not do. Years ago, a psychiatrist suggested that every time I noticed a negative thought, I should snap a rubber band around my wrist. He said, every time I think negative, every time I feel negative, I'll snap the rubber band to get out of that thought. But you know what? After an hour, my whole arm was completely red. It was not something that should have been recommended to me, because it was clear that my mind is negative. Okay, the lesson wasn't in that sense that I needed to punish myself, but the lesson was realizing how often negative thinking occurred without any awareness. A more useful exercise of this was, I read it once, is imagine a second version of yourself standing beside you, a wise observer, a master, professor, ultimate observer, carrying a clipboard, not a judge, not a critic, simply observing. This observer, the second version of yourself, watches your thoughts arise and disappear. A thought appears, the observer, your second version of yourself, writes it down. Nothing more. No labeling as good or bad. We do not want to connotate them as positive or negative. We just want to become aware of what is actually happening in our mind. This is what I'm thinking right now. That should be the context of the observer. This has just arisen. This has just come into my mind. Then another thought appears, and another. Over time, something really cool happens. You develop a relationship with your thoughts rather than becoming trapped inside your thoughts, trapped inside your thinking patterns. You start noticing patterns. You begin seeing which thoughts repeat. You discover which stories you've been telling yourself all these years. And I have to be honest right now, these tips, the sentences that I had written down yesterday, I don't think I would have been able to grasp the message behind it. Okay? And for the first time, you gain a small but powerful space between yourself and your thinking. You have two spaces right now. That space is awareness. And awareness is where change begins, and that is the most beautiful part. It's not a quick fix. The first few days now they feel pointless. The first few days, the first few weeks may seem as though nothing is happening. But beneath the whole surface of this, something is changing within. Within you, something is changing. You are training yourself to observe the unconscious. We are being conscious of the unconscious. You're becoming familiar with the machinery of your own mind. And once you can see your patterns clearly, you are no longer completely controlled by them. Perhaps freedom is not the absence of negative thoughts. Freedom for me is the recognition that not every thought should be believed. And as always, I wanted to give you 3 practical lessons along the way. Is question the voice. Whenever a strong negative statement appears, ask. You try to be aware. It will take time, but ask, who just said that? And is it actually true? Because most thoughts crumble when examined closely. I can assure you that 90% of the thinking patterns I had back in the day for years and years and years could have been analyzed, and what I would have gotten out of it was, what the hell? Why did I just, how did it come this far? Second practical lesson, observe before reacting. Instead of fighting thoughts or replacing them immediately, practice noticing them. As I said before, you do not want to connotate them positive or negative. It doesn't matter. We want to have a shift in awareness. Awareness often changes a pattern more effectively than resistance. We don't want to resist. We want to let it happen and be aware of what is happening in my mind, in your mind. Separate identity from experience. You may experience failure, anxiety, sadness, or depression. Those experiences are not your identity. A thought saying, I am a failure, is fundamentally different from, I failed at something, and failing is okay. But identifying with a thought, a constant repetition of, I am worthy of nothing, it will take you down a negative spiral, and it will rip the ground beneath your feet. Now, the biggest shift is learning to think positively. I want you to, from this video, learn that a thought is an event occurring in your mind, and it's not necessarily a fact about reality. Okay? As I said in the middle of the video, I don't know if these things, these tips, would have helped me in the way that I understand them now, 10 to 12 years later. But try to set a timer on your watch or on your phone for 30 minutes a day for the next 4 weeks, and observe what's happening in those 30 minutes. And if you become accustomed, adjusted to that process, after a month, try it for an hour. Sit outside, sit in your room, sit next to the window, and just observe. Try and observe while walking, while sat in the bus, while driving, while doing anything. Just try and observe, okay?